Hello, bonjour Alberta. Did you know that at least 238,000 people speak Français in Alberta? And those numbers just keep on growing? Oui, oui, c'est vrai, it's true. And thanks to Shaw TV Community Access Programming, we get to reach out to everyone to let you know all about special people, places, events, and activities happening right here in this great province, in both English and en français. That's right, mes amis. We begin the first part of our program in English, and then we repeat it en français. So stay with us. Restez à l'écoute.
Bienvenue and welcome to Hello, Bonjour, Alberta. In this episode, we have another very interesting guest to present to you, but this one is not an Albertan. That's not something we do very often. I'd like to welcome you, Derek Earl, of the World Trade Center, based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Welcome.
Thank you very much. We're delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Having spent a fair bit of time in Manitoba myself back in my undergrad days, nice to know someone that comes not only from Winnipeg, Manitoba, but from Saint-Boniface, Manitoba is where you work actually, isn't it?
That's correct. Our office is the World Trade Center Winnipeg. We're based in Saint-Boniface, which is really the heart of the French Quarter of Manitoba, in the old City Hall building in a historic
Fantastic.
center.
Before we get to the World Trade Center, let's talk about you. Where were you born, and how did you end up there over time?
Born and raised in Manitoba. I grew up just outside of Winnipeg, north of the city, in a community called St. Andrews, near Selkirk, Manitoba. And it was a bit of a long and winding route to eventually wind up here at the World Trade Center, but studied in Manitoba, University of Manitoba. And after that, it was a background in political science, international relations, which those interests really kind of took me overseas to continue my studies. But also at that time, I really began to see a need for and an interest for to learn French and become bilingual. So it kind of took me down that path to some further studies in France, later at the University of Ottawa in a bilingual program, and some further studies at the Université de Saint-Boniface in Manitoba as well.
Okay, so what did you do when you were in France?
It was actually two different stays. Initially, it was for a very intensive language program to learn French as an adult. I'm bilingual now, but it wasn't. It was really through study and some perseverance that I was able to pick that up. But then later, after I'd been working for a number of years, my wife and I went back over to France to gain some work experience. There's some terrific programs, bilateral programs that allow Canadians to work and young professionals to work in France. So we took advantage of that and ended up spending most of the year with the Canadian Embassy in Paris in the trade section.
Okay.
And that eventually led me to my current situation here at the World Trade Center Winnipeg.
So you met the founder, essentially.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a bit of an interesting story to how the World Trade Center Winnipeg was formed, and then it was an initiative led by the French community in Manitoba, who had started a trade agency that was really focused on the whole idea of how can we leverage our bilingualism, how can we leverage the French connections in Manitoba for economic development and for trade development strategy. So Manitoba had not previously been very active in working in markets like France and Belgium and even in Quebec within the Canadian context. So that agency called NIM was created at that time with the whole idea of how can we leverage some of those cultural connections and ties. And
what year would that have been?
This was created in 2007.
Okay.
And this was in 2008 and 2009 when at this time I'm over in Paris, but because of this mandate to develop with France, we kept meeting up at the Canadian Embassy, and one thing led to another, and some terrific and exciting projects were happening in Manitoba at the time. So I was lured to come back to Manitoba, and been there ever since, and it's been terrific.
And this executive director's name is?
Her name is Mariette Muller. She's one of the real leaders in the Francophone community, a real champion for the French language in Manitoba. Started that initiative, and then we've since, through that time, joined the World Trade Centers Association. So we went through a rebrand as we joined this global association, which is headquartered out of New York City at the World Trade Center. and it links up over 300 trade centers in close to 100 countries around the world. So now Winnipeg and through our business community, we're now connected to that platform, to counterparts that we can work with for finding opportunities for Manitoba companies and for Canadian companies who want to do trade.
Oh, wow. Okay, so a few nuts and bolts. How many people work at the World Trade Center, and what's the work environment like?
There's 18 of us, and that's another element that's a little bit unique about our organization, that we're an officially bilingual organization, where in fact the working language day to day is in French. We find it's very important to maintain a very, very high level within the office, and that's the best way to keep it very active and very dynamic. So many of our clientele is English and everything is bilingual, but on a day-to-day office, internal meetings, that's
so
all
you're speaking in French while you might be passing around documents that are in English, and everybody's doing the translation on the fly, exercising their linguistic capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people your employees are from where?
Well, we have from all over the world, really. Everyone's settled and living in Manitoba now, but we have some Franco-Manitobans. We have from Quebec, from France, from Belgium, from Tunisia and Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire, and in terms of some of the backgrounds. So quite a rich and varied background. We have someone from Mexico originally who French is his third language, and then myself, who English speaker by birth, but have really sort of embraced French, and I'm all in now. With that, so.
Wow. So the organization in Winnipeg, what does it do? What's its territory? What kind of programs and assistance do you provide?
The World Trade Center Winnipeg, we've got really two main focuses in terms of the types of services that we offer and the clientele we serve. On the one hand, we run what's called our Business Info Center, which is a series of information services, research, training, and seminars geared towards startups, new businesses. If you want to get started with a new business, you can contact our people on the front line, and we can help you go through that process, tell you everything where you need to go, help you get some of the resources and training to know how to run a business. And the other part of it is the trade development. And so for that, we can work with companies one-on-one. We organize trade missions. We receive incoming business delegations, and we match them up with Manitoba companies. We do some seminars, some training. Again, we've got quite a market research capability to support them. And we organize every 2 years a very major global business forum in Winnipeg called Centralia, which brings together, it's a global conference in scope. It brings together 30 countries and 700-800 delegates at a time. And it's all business leaders, and they get matched up for very targeted one-on-one meetings to help them pursue new business opportunities, help the Canadian companies find partners in other markets, and help those from abroad who are interested in exploring the opportunities in Canada.
And when would the next Centralia be?
We're very actively preparing for the next edition of this, which is taking place May 25th to 27th, 2016, next year in Winnipeg.
2016. All right. Yes, and as the vice president, you're front and center organizing that, are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why you were hired, as I recall you telling me.
Initially when I first came to World Trade Center, it was to work on organizing the first edition of Centralia, and this is now the 4th edition of this global business forum that we're organizing in Winnipeg.
So it's mostly for Manitoba businesses, but do people come from around Western Canada also, to some degree?
They certainly do, and it's, I wouldn't actually say it's just for Manitoba businesses. Of course, we have very strong representation from the local business community, given that it's hosted in Winnipeg. Sure. But it's really a global conference. About 50% of the participants will be from Canada, with quite a strong representation from Western Canada. We also have some specific themes this year where we're looking at opportunities in the North and the Arctic from both a Canadian and a global perspective. So the Northern Territories are going to be participating, the northern regions, Quebec. Because of our roots, as I was explaining, we've had very strong relationships and ties, so they tend to be the largest Canadian delegation that comes into the event. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So can you share an anecdote with us about a type of a trade link that occurred through the World Trade Center that perhaps wouldn't have happened otherwise?
Yeah, certainly. One that comes to mind is a company that we've done a fair bit of work with over the last couple of years is a company called Cypher Environmental. And so they were interested in connections down in Brazil. They've got a variety of products, environmentally products used in road constructions and mining operations. And so they were looking for help with their distributors. So now, as part of the World Trade Centers Association, we were able to work with our counterparts at the World Trade Center in Sao Paulo. They could do some of the market research on the ground, identify some pre-qualified contacts. He ended up going down there for a couple of days. They took care of him down there and ended up finding a distributor out of the process. So that's the type of way that we can leverage that membership within a global network.
Definitely.
To be able to get the market intelligence and the B2B connections.
Because of course the alternative would be quite intimidating to have to go down there yourself to Brazil in particular, where unless you speak Portuguese or Spanish, it's a little hard to get by. And to make those contacts and to have all those introductions prepared in advance would be a real great assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's some of the type of thing we're able to do, and it's as we organize this edition of the Centralia Business Forum, this is the first time we do it as members of the World Trade Center Association. So we have now hundreds of counterparts, trade organizations out there who are working with us from around the world, from India, from Brazil, as I was mentioning, they're in Colombia, Mexico, numerous in the United States, Europe, that are all planning to be in Winnipeg next May with their business delegates, and we'll get some real matchmaking happening.
So it will be a significantly larger event than it has been in the past, you think?
We're definitely expecting it to grow. We're still targeting the 700 to 800 participants around there, but I think we're poised for some growth. So
that'd be pretty good, yes. Yeah. That'll
cautiously optimistic.
Make for a fun weekend in Winnipeg there for sure. So the organization on a more long-term basis, what's the strategy? Where are things headed?
We naturally continue to work with some of our key partnerships that we're developing here on a longer-term basis, and even something like this Centralia Business Forum. It's not a one-off event. This is part of a longer-term trade development strategy. It is a massive lead generator for the companies. And so a big part of how we sustain this and how we really are able to translate that type of activity into results for companies is that we work with all the partner delegation leaders that are coming in, so that when there's an interested party between one of their businesses and one of ours, we continue to work together after the fact to help them move that forward, find out what kind of resources we need to help them do that, what type of information do they need to translate a good first contact and a first meeting into a longer term business deal. So that's an ongoing part of the activity that we work on as well.
And I would imagine you're quite heavily tied into the organizations in Western Canada and the rest of Canada that do similar things. Like, what would be your similar organization here in Alberta?
Our most directly most similar one is the World Trade Center Edmonton, which is a partnership with the World Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. We're starting to work more closely with them, and we're in fact here in Calgary today with Calgary Economic Development, who's also involved in some of the trade promotion space. So we continue to build some of those relationships, and I think we also want to always be looking at ways how we can be working together and sort of leveraging some of those collaborative efforts to help us all, help all of our companies get out there and find new markets.
And as you were saying earlier, you also interact with the various embassies and trade delegations and things from other countries that are here permanently or semi-permanently.
Very much. Yeah. We work very closely with the Canadian government officials and trade commissioners abroad when we're out there, and increasing with delegations here internally. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much, Derek Earl, Vice President of World Trade Center in Winnipeg, for joining us today. And please stay with us. On continue en français.